Calvert Library and welcome to It's Elementary. So today I'd like to talk a little science with you. And we're going to talk about this person in particular, this scientist right here. Have you ever seen him before? Maybe you know who he is. If you haven't seen that picture, then maybe you've seen that picture. That is a wonderful picture. He looks like he's being so silly, isn't he? But really, this is one of the smartest people that has ever lived. He was a genius, and his name was Albert Einstein. Have you heard that name before? You know, sometimes people even use that to mean that you're really smart. Has everybody ever told you, wow, you are such an Einstein for figuring that out? Can you imagine being so smart that your name actually means genius? But he was that smart. He was a scientist, he was a professor, he discovered all sorts of wonderful things. And I have a book that I'd like to share about his life that's called On a Beam of Light. This book was written by Jennifer Berne with pictures by Vladimir Radunsky, and we'd like to thank the publisher, Chronicle Books, for allowing us to share this with you today. So let's take a little closer look. On a Beam of Light. Over 100 years ago, as the stars swirled in the sky, as the earth circled the sun, as the March winds blew through a little town by a river, a baby boy was born. His parents named him Albert. Albert turned 1 year old and didn't say a word. Albert turned 2 and didn't say a word. Albert turned 3 and hardly said a word at all. He just looked around with his big, curious eyes, looked and wondered, looked and wondered. His parents worried. Little Albert was so different. Was there something wrong? But he was their baby, so they loved him, no matter what. One day, when Albert was sick in bed, his father brought him a compass, a small round case with a magnetic needle inside. No matter which way Albert turned the compass, the needle always pointed north, as if held by an invisible hand. Albert was so amazed his body trembled. Suddenly, he knew there were mysteries in the world, hidden and silent, unknown and unseen. He wanted, more than anything, to understand those mysteries. Albert started asking questions. Questions at home, questions at school, so many questions that some of his teachers told him he was a disruption to his class. They said he would never amount to anything unless he learned to behave like all of the other students. But Albert didn't want to be like the other students. He wanted to discover the hidden mysteries in the world. One day, as Albert was zipping through the countryside on his bicycle, he looked up at the beams of sunlight speeding from the sun to the earth. He wondered, what would it be like to ride one of those beams? And in his mind, right then and there, Albert was no longer on his bicycle, no longer on the country road. He was racing through space on a beam of light. It was the biggest, most exciting thought Albert had ever had, and it filled his mind with questions. Albert began to read and study. He read about light and sound, about heat and magnetism, and about gravity, the invisible force that pulls us down toward our planet and keeps the moon from floating away into outer space. And he read about numbers. Albert loved numbers. They were like a secret language for figuring things out. But all that reading still didn't answer all of Albert's questions. So he kept on reading, wondering, and learning. When Albert graduated from college, he wanted to teach the subjects he loved, all the things that he had read about all those years. But Albert couldn't find a job as a teacher, so he got another job. A simple, quiet job in a government office, an office where he worked with other people's ideas and inventions. He did his work very well and very quickly, so quickly that he had lots of extra time to think and wonder. Albert watched a lump of sugar dissolve and disappear into his hot tea. How could this happen? He watched the smoke from his pipe swirl and disappear into the air. How could one thing disappear into another? Then he began to figure it out. He thought about the idea that everything is made out of teeny tiny moving bits of stuff, far too tiny to see, little bits called atoms. Some people didn't believe that atoms existed, but Albert's figuring helped prove that everything in the world is made of atoms. Even sugar and tea, even smoke and air, even Albert and you. Then Albert thought about motion. He realized that everything is always moving, moving through space, moving through time. Even sound asleep, we're moving as our planet circles the sun and our lives travel into the future. Albert saw time and space as no one ever had before. Albert wrote down his new ideas, put them into envelopes, and sent them to science magazines. The magazines printed everything Albert sent. He hoped that scientists and professors would be interested, and they were. Very interested indeed. They asked Albert to come and work with them and teach with them. For the first time in his life, people started to say, Albert is a genius. Now Albert could spend all his days doing what he loved, imagining, wondering, figuring, and thinking. Albert thought about very, very big things, like the size and shape of the entire universe. He thought about very, very small things, like what goes on inside the atoms that everything is made of. He thought about mysterious forces like magnetism and gravity. He discovered whole new ways to understand how these things work. Everywhere Albert went, he would think and think. One of Albert's favorite thinking places was his little sailboat. He loved to let his mind wander as the wind blew him across the water. Sometimes, when Albert was having a tough time with a tricky problem, he would put it aside and play his violin. Music made Albert happy. He said it helped him think better. Albert even chose his clothes for thinking. His favorites were his comfy, old, saggy-baggy sweaters and pants, and shoes without socks. He said now that he was grown up, no one could tell him to put on his socks. In the town where he lived, he became known for wandering around, deep in thought, sometimes eating an ice cream cone. Always recognizable with his long, wild hair, which by then had become quite white. Everywhere Albert went, he tried to figure out the secrets of the universe, and he never forgot about the beam of light that he rode so long ago in his imagination. Albert figured out that no person, no thing, could ever zoom through space as fast as a beam of light. He figured that if he could travel near the speed of light, crazy things would happen. Only minutes would pass for Albert, while years and years went by for the rest of us. This idea was so amazing, people didn't believe it at first, but scientists today have proven that it's true. Albert thought and figured until the very last minute of the very last day of his life. He asked questions never asked before, found answers never found before, and dreamed up ideas never dreamt before. Albert's ideas helped build spaceships and satellites that travel to the moon and beyond. His thinking helped us understand our universe as no one ever had before. But still, Albert left us with many big questions. Questions that scientists are working on today. Questions that someday you may answer by wondering, thinking, and imagining. The end. Well, I hope you can see from our story that Einstein thought that the most important thing that anybody could do is to keep learning, to keep thinking, to keep wondering, to keep reading, because there are still some problems out here that need some solving, and you guys are going to be the ones to do it. So to help remind you of this, I thought we'd make a little craft today, a little inspiration for you when you're trying to think of the solution to the next problem. So here's what you're going to need to make our little activity today. You're going to need some paper. It doesn't really matter too much what color it is, but if it's not white, it's a little bit better. So I've got a little piece of brown paper here, just some construction paper. You're going to need something to draw with, so some markers, some crayons, something like that. You're going to need some glue. A glue stick works fine, or if you've got regular glue, that's okay too. And then you're going to need some cotton balls. So why don't you gather up all of your supplies, and then we'll come back together and make our craft. All right, welcome back. You got all your supplies? Okay, I think we're ready to go. So our picture of Einstein is going to remind you to always keep thinking and learning. So what was the most distinctive thing about Albert Einstein? You gotta say his hair, right? He had that big white hair that stuck out all over. So that's what we're gonna make sure that we do in our picture, okay? So first you need to take your paper and draw your face, okay? I've already drawn mine. There it is. See, anybody can make these. So I'm going to take my picture and then I'm going to use the cotton balls to make Albert Einstein's hair. So, but we don't want big cotton balls like that. We want it to be kind of wispy, right? So we're going to kind of spread those cotton balls out like that. Just make it nice and wispy, just like Albert's hair was, right? So once we do that, we're going to use our glue stick. And we're going to just put a little glue here and put our wispy hair on there. And we're going to keep going around and making this fabulous hair all the way around his face. Don't forget his mustache. Let's give him a little wispy mustache too, huh? Let's see. A little wispy mustache down there too. Oh, that's perfect. Wonderful. So keep going around the picture until you have all the hair filled around. So we're going to keep gluing all around our picture until we've got hair all the way around. And look at that. Does that look like Einstein or what? So if you keep this picture and look at it whenever you want, you'll remember to keep thinking, keep learning, keep wondering, keep reading all summer long. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Stay tuned to Calvert Library social media feeds for programs for the whole family. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.